Welcome to AGK's Vinyl Life. I'm your host, Anthony K, and today is Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. And on this week's episode, I'm doing a follow-up, a sequel, a part 2, a volume 2, whatever you want to call it, to a video I released last week entitled 33 Legendary Albums for Every Record Collection. The video has been very popular, had a ton of views. I'm so happy. Thank you everybody that's watched that video. It's been probably my single most successful video since I started this channel in the amount of views it's had in 1 week. It's been very successful. So thank you everybody for watching that one. And it was a long one too. It was like 54 minutes and I'm surprised that people hung in there and I got great comments and it's doing very well. So as promised in that video, I'm doing the part 2 as that video only covered from letters A to K. Whereas in this video, which is 33 more legendary albums for every record collection, this goes from L to Z, or Z as we say here in Canada. So 33 more albums from L to Z to finish off that series. And some of you might have noticed last week that there were no J's or K's. Even though the video was from A to K, I actually finished at I with Iron Maiden, I believe it was. And there were no J's and K's, and that's because in the final selection process, I'd picked probably close to 50 albums when I originally did that video. And I had to wheedle that 50 albums down to that magic number 33. And to do that, I had to eliminate albums, and it was strictly an unbiased opinion. These aren't necessarily favorite records of mine. The way I chose these down to 33 is they were based off of sales awards. Golds, platinums, diamonds. And basically when I had my 50 or so last week that I had to narrow down to 33, the ones that were tossed out of the mix just didn't receive as many sales awards as the ones that did make it. And so to give a completely unbiased opinion here in this video, that's how I based these albums on, is strictly by the amount of platinums and golds and diamonds and so on, silvers, whatever, that these albums attained. And all of these albums have all attained multiple platinum awards and sometimes multiple diamond awards. So that makes them a pretty safe bet for purchase to add to any record collection, because albums that sell that well are pretty well, are spectacular beginning to end. So when I did these albums originally, I looked through my collection, picked what I thought in my mind were legendary albums, so that's where my opinion came in, but then went online and researched every single one of the albums. It took me hours, and that's how I wheedled it down to another 33 albums. And these videos have been geared, this video and last week's video, and even the video the week before that, 33 greatest hits albums, have been geared towards younger viewers that are just getting into vinyl now. And I get so many DMs and questions. People ask me all the time, Anthony, I'm getting into vinyl. What do you recommend? What should I buy? And so these videos are answering all those questions for anybody has ever had. My first answer has always been greatest hits albums are the best way to go when you're starting a collection and you want something by an artist and you don't know what record to buy that particular artist. If they have a greatest hits albums, buy that one. But these ones are all safe bets in my opinion. You can't go wrong. The sales numbers have proven that. And let's get on with it, because I got 33 to go through, and last week's video was long and the weeks before was long. So I'm going to try to blow through these in record time without going too fast, because I want to tell you a little something about them. Let's get on with it right away. And we're starting with letter L. And our first one up, an album I've shown briefly before, and this is Lady Gaga. And her second album, Born This Way, Lady Gaga, Born This Way. And the reason why I chose this album is because it does have multiple platinums and multiple diamond awards, so you can't go wrong. I would have chosen her first album, her debut album, Just Dance, but it has just been released on vinyl, and I've actually got a pre-order in for it. I'm waiting for it to arrive, so it might have been a 50-50 between Just Dance and this one, but as I have this one on vinyl. I'm showing this one today, but you know, it's a pretty tight race between her debut album, Just Dance. Lady Gaga, Born This Way, definitely one for every record collection. Next up is an album that needs no introduction, and it is Led Zeppelin and their debut album, Led Zeppelin. And just to say why I chose Led Zeppelin's debut album, Led Zeppelin are definitely a band that everybody should have in their record collection, but I highly, highly, highly recommend their debut album. This is where my personal opinion comes in. I think this is the best album they ever made. I looked through the awards for platinums and diamonds and golds and all that for all of their entire discography. They only made 8 studio albums for a total of 9 discs worth of material. There was one more after their last album called Coda, that was made up of leftovers. It wasn't an official studio album. It was made up of leftover cutting room floor tracks. But their actual studio albums, there were only 8, one of them being a double album, Physical Graffiti. 9 discs worth of music. And if you watched my 33 Greatest Hits albums video, I said that basically the best thing you could do for Led Zeppelin was buy the Mothership box set, because it had 4 discs in it and basically had everything, all the best from Led Zeppelin was in there. As far as I'm concerned, everything I like from Zeppelin is in that box set. And this is where I'll probably get some bad comments from you people, and I might piss off a few of you, but I don't think Led Zeppelin were as great as everybody thinks they are. I don't think they made great albums, as everybody thinks they are. And even though their albums all won multiple platinums and golds and diamonds and blah, 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 as far as I'm concerned, this was the only really great album from beginning to end. I grew up here in Toronto, and we have a rock station called Q107. And unfortunately, Q107, our hard rock station, used to play Led Zeppelin like crazy. And they even had this segment on their radio station called Get the Lead Out, which was basically at the top of every hour, they got the lead out and played a Led Zeppelin song. So they just hammered us with Led Zeppelin all the time, to the point where, unfortunately, I got sick and tired of Led Zeppelin, because it was just always being played and always being played. And when you play something so much, you get sick and tired of it. And it kind of ruined Zeppelin for me. And even, years and years and years later, I don't listen to radio anymore, pretty much. But that left an impression on my mind. And because Led Zeppelin got overplayed like crazy, I just got turned off of Led Zeppelin. But the one album that always is a fallback that I do love to listen to every time is this one here, Led Zeppelin's debut album, Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin, their initial debut album, absolutely. Good Times, Bad Times, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, You Shook Me, Dazed and Confused, Your Time Is Gonna Come, Black Mountainside, Communication Breakdown, I Can't Quit You Baby, How Many More Times. This is just great rock and roll and blues, like they should have been doing all along. Next up, a woman that needs no introduction, Madonna. And this is her 3rd album, True Blue. And this one, of course, was her most successful album to date, with multiple platinums and diamonds. True Blue, Madonna, mid-80s. And this is an original Canadian first press. And of course, this album had Papa Don't Preach, Open Your Heart, Live to Tell, True Blue, and La Isla Bonita, all big singles. Madonna, True Blue. Definitely a must-have in anybody's record collection. Another album that needs no introduction, a very famous album. This is Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell. Absolutely required in every record collection. When I was a teenager, girls loved this album. They loved the song Paradise by the Dashboard Light. It was kind of a female anti-sex anthem, to put it bluntly. But this is a brilliant album. Todd Rundgren's on here. He produced it. He does guitars on Bat Out of Hell. Just a fantastic spin. Definitely one for every record collection. Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell, with, of course, Bat Out of Hell. You took the words right out of my mouth. Heaven Can Wait. All Revved Up and No Place to Go. 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad. Paradise by the Dashboard Light. And for Crying Out Loud. Absolutely, this should be in every record collection on the planet. Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell. And all of these records I'm showing, as I said in my last video, are easily obtainable anywhere in the world. That was another criteria when I made my video and chose these albums, is that they would be easily available in any country in the world. That some of these albums wouldn't be only popular in this country and not this country. These are all universally popular albums that should universally be available at reasonable prices anywhere in the world. Next up, some metal, and probably one of the most famous metal bands. I showed Iron Maiden in the last video, but this is pretty much the other metal band that everybody needs. This is Metallica, and this is their Metallica album. And this album, I believe, was from 1991. Metallica's otherwise sometimes call it the Black Album. It's just simple, not much to see here. This is Metallica. This is their most successful album to date. Multiple platinums and diamonds, with, of course, the classic Enter Sandman, as well as Nothing Else Matters, were the two huge hits on this. But this is a fantastic spin, beginning to end. And this is a recent 2-record repress of the album. Metallica, self-titled album, Metallica. Another album that needs no introduction. And when I rate albums too, another thing that I do when I rate albums, not rate albums, but when I chose these albums, is I don't let political and news things and things in these artists' personal life affect the music. To me, you judge an artist by their music, not by what they did in their personal life. And thus said, Michael Jackson, probably one of the greatest funk, R&B, soul, whatever albums, dance albums. I mean, this album basically started MTV. Michael Jackson, Thriller. I think this should be in every record collection. It's an album, absolutely brilliant, brilliant, brilliant album. And it's legendary and definitely should be in every record collection. Thriller with Wanna Be Starting Something. Baby Be Mine, This Girl Is Mine with Paul McCartney. The immortal Thriller, the immortal Beat It, the immortal Billie Jean, Human Nature, Pretty Young Thing, The Lady in My Life. This is and always will be a spectacular album. And though bad, maybe slightly hedged this album in diamonds and platinums, they were both so close that I think this is the one that everybody should have. This should be in everybody's record collection, regardless of anything else. Next up, some jazz for you. And one of the most famous jazz musicians of all time, Mr. Miles Davis. And this is Kinda Blue, another album that has had massive, massive sales in the jazz category, with So What, Freddie Freeloader, Blue and Green, All Blues, and Flamenco Sketches. This album you cannot go wrong with. A fantastic spin. Honestly though, not my favorite Miles Davis album. I find this album a little too blue for me, a little too slow for me. I personally like Milestones. That's my favorite Miles Davis album. But as I'm trying to be unbiased and show strictly albums that had massive sales, Kinda Blue by Miles Davis is the clear winner in that one. Miles Davis, Kinda Blue. Next up, from late 60s, we're looking at the Moody Blues. Days of Future Past. Moody Blues with the London Festival Orchestra, late 60s, and I think this is required in every record collection. Famous for, of course, there was basically, 4 sections to the album. The day begins dawn, then lunch break, then the afternoon, then the night. And from the afternoon portion came, of course, the famous song Tuesday Afternoon, and of course, Nights in White Satin, which is an absolutely immortal song. So definitely should be in everybody's record collection. And this is an original first pressing, an original Durham first press, night stereo press, Nights in White Satin, Days of Future Past, The Moody Blues. Next up, something a little on the newer side from a newer artist, a 2000s artist. And this particular album came out in 2009. And this is a very popular band nowadays. And this album did go multiple platinum and even multiple diamond. And this is for everybody, Muse. That's right, Muse. For some of you older VCers that don't know so much of the 90s, 2000, 2010s, this is something I definitely recommend for you. This is Muse and their album, The Resistance. And this is a fantastic spin. It's a double disc, double album collection. The songs on here are, of course, Uprising, Resistance, Undisclosed Desires, United States of Eurasia, Guiding Light, Unnatural Selection, MK Ultra, I Belong to You, and then Exogenesis Symphony, parts 1, 2, and 3. Highly recommend Muse and their album, The Resistance, from 2009. Next up, a woman I've shown before on my channel. I've shown this album before on my channel, so I'm not going to go into a big deal about it, but this is from 1981, I believe, 1981 or 1982, 1981, and this is, of course, my teenage crush, Miss Olivia Newton-John, one of the great female singers of all time in history, Miss Olivia Newton-John, and this is her Physical album, which caused so much controversy in 1981, and a multiple platinum selling album from her, with, of course, the classic song Physical on it. Miss Olivia Newton-John, Physical, must have for every record collection. Next up, my favorite pop group of all time. I'm a huge fan of these guys. If people that have watched my previous videos know, huge fan of this pop duo. They are the most successful pop duo in history and my favorite pop band of all time. And they are the Pet Shop Boys, and this is Very from 1993. Very from 1993. And this is a recent repress of their Very album. And this album was huge when it came out. This is a multiple platinum and diamond selling album, the biggest selling album in their entire discography. Very, with such big hits on it as Can You Forgive Her, Liberation, Dreaming of the Queen, One and One Make Five, One in a Million, and the massively popular single, at least it certainly was here in Canada, Go West, which was a their own version of a famous Village People song. I think Village People were the first people to do Go West, but the Pet Shop Boys made it into a massive hit. Go West, Pet Shop Boys Very, absolute must-have. If you ever own any Pet Shop Boys album, I would recommend Please, their very first album featuring Mustang Girls, and definitely Very. A fantastic spin. Next up is the only live album that I'm going to show, because when this album came out back in the 70s, it blew up. It blew up. This artist had really not done anything. Nobody, you know, his albums had not, they hadn't sold gold. They hadn't, a lot of them had, most of them didn't even chart. And even after this album, a lot of his albums really didn't chart or have massive sales. But this one album blew up, and everybody had this album. And I remember when this album came out, I remember going to see him at a sellout crowd at a stadium here in Toronto, and it was just masses of people that went to see it. And it's Peter Frampton, Frampton Comes Alive, and it is known as the single greatest album, charting album, and lasting on the chart for a number of weeks, live album ever released by anybody. It lasted on the Billboard Top 200 and on multiple charts longer than any other live album has ever done. And this album absolutely exploded on the world. Double live album, and it had, of course, the big hits on here were Show Me the Way, All I Want to Be Is By Your Side, Baby I Love Your Way, and the fantastic 14-minute epic Do You Feel Like We Do. Frampton Comes Alive, Peter Frampton, the single greatest live, best-selling live album probably in history. Get it. You won't be sorry. Next up, an album that definitely needs no introduction. It is considered probably the greatest album ever made by anybody. This album remained on the Billboard Top 200 for 10 years consecutive. It charted on multiple charts for a total of 950 consecutive weeks. It is considered one of the greatest albums ever made. No introduction really needed. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, 950 weeks charting. 950 weeks charting. Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd, an absolute... If you own no albums in your entire life and only own one album, this is the album you gotta own. Dark Side of the Moon, I don't even need to discuss the track listings or anything. Engineered by Mr. Alan Parsons from the Alan Parsons Project, who also engineered the Beatles' Abbey Road. Dark Side of the Moon, and this is the latest repress, the most recent repress and remaster, and in my opinion, the best pressing, best sounding, best pressing of this album, bar none, ever made. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. If you don't have this, and you don't intend on having this, then you shouldn't even be a record collector. You shouldn't be a vinyl enthusiast, because it's just... It is the word legendary. You know, you look up the word legendary vinyl in the dictionary, and you'll probably see a picture of Dark Side of the Moon. Okay, moving on. Next up, I'm talking The Police. And they only released 5 studio albums, but this had multiple platinums and a diamond. And this is The Police, Synchronicity. And I've shown this on my Rare and Banned albums video, because this is a Canadian first pressing that, as I have discussed before, although the vinyl looks black to the human eye, it is actually purple. And if you hold a flashlight up to it, to the back side of it, you will see it is purple. It'll shine through. But that is that was on the Canadian first pressings of this album. The Police, Synchronicity, of course, massive hit singles on it were, of course, Every Breath You Take and King of Pain and Wrapped Around Your Finger, all massive singles. The Police, Synchronicity, definitely a must-have in every record collection in the world. And that was from mid-80s. Also from the mid-80s, I don't think I even need to talk much about this album at all. It's Prince and The Revolution and Purple Rain, an iconic album. And this is a very recent limited edition picture disc version of the album. It sounds really good too. Modern picture discs sound great. Don't be swayed by by the people that trash talk picture discs, because actually the modern picture discs all sound really great. I have no issues with them. And the people that bitch and moan about picture discs most of the time are the ones that were around bitching and moaning about them in the 80s when picture discs were junk. The 70s and 80s picture discs, you bought them for the picture. But honestly, I have no issues with modern day picture discs. They sound great, and this Prince one sounds fantastic. But this is Prince and The Revolution, Purple Rain. Another one I don't need to talk about. It should just be in your collection, period. That's it. Purple Rain, let's go crazy. Purple Rain. Absolutely. Next up, another legendary band who, of course, they made a movie about a couple of years ago that won an Academy Award. And that is Queen, Freddie Mercury and Queen. And well, all their albums, quite a few of their albums won platinums and golds and things. It was a real crapshoot for me, because Innuendo actually, technically, their last album actually got a few more awards than any of their other albums, but they were all pretty close, and I chose this one, News of the World, because it was famous for, of course, We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions. News of the World. I had to pick one. You have to have Queen in your collection, and in my opinion, this is probably the starting off point. An actual absolutely fantastic spin. Queen. News of the World with We Are the Champions and We Will Rock You. Definitely must have in every record collection in the world. And from Q we go to R now. And up next in the R's is probably one of the most influential punk bands in history. And I think everybody, if you're having a record collection, everybody should have a little bit of punk music in their collection. These guys are immortal. Unfortunately, most of them have passed away and are no longer with us. And while this was another tough choice, these guys they didn't chart that much. They didn't get that many golds or platinums or anything like that. because they were in punk, and of course, unfortunately, punk just never really grabbed the market like, you know, more popular stuff. But these guys are legendary for sure, and I think you need something in your collection from these guys. I've chosen their third album, even though their first album is the only one to actually go gold. I've chosen the third album because it actually charted in more countries in the world, and it actually is considered by Rolling Stone magazine as the #3 greatest punk album in history. And that is the Ramones' Rocket to Russia. Everybody should have at least one Ramones album in their collection. And the Ramones are infectious. And I would be surprised if you bought the Ramones and didn't want more Ramones after spinning this. This album was just absolutely fun and crazy. Creighton Hop, Rockaway Beach, Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, Lock It Love, I Don't Care. Sheena is a punk rocker. We're a Happy Family. Teenage Lobotomy. Do You Want to Dance? An old 50s class standard. I Want to Be Well. I Can't Give You Anything. Ramona, Surfin' Bird. And Why Is It Always This Way? The Ramones, Rocket to Russia. This is a recent repress. Considered the third greatest punk album in history. Rocket to Russia. Some Ramones in your collection. You need it. Now we're going to jump ahead again, and we're going to jump into some 2010s music. And I believe this one is from 2011, 10, or 2010. And from a very popular modern day singer. And this album has won multiple platinums and multiple diamond awards. And I think everybody should have something from this lady in their collection. This is Rihanna and her Loud album. To date, her most successful album. And I think this one should be in anybody's collection, young or old, doesn't matter who you are. Rihanna, this is a spectacular spin. It is a really great album. I love this album. I really do. I like Rihanna a lot, but this album is absolutely fantastic. And this album is definitely one to be in every record collection on the planet, hands down. Rihanna. Featuring What's My Name? And that featured Drake, good old Toronto boy. Cheers, drink to that. Fading, Only Girl in the World, California King Size Bed, Man Down, Raining Men featuring Nicki Minaj, Complicated, Love the Way You Lie Part 2 featuring Eminem. This is Rihanna's 2010 Loud. Definitely must have in every record collection on the planet. As we're in the R's, of course, we must have the Rolling Stones. And when I did my research, the newer stuff like from Tattoo You, Undercover, Bridges to Babylon, Voodoo Lounge, all their later albums from probably starting around Tattoo You, all had multiple platinums, multiple golds, even some diamonds. Their earlier stuff didn't score as well. I'm not a big fan of their 70s stuff myself, even though a lot of people are, and this is another controversial subject. Remember, this is my opinion. But I think if you're jumping off and starting your record collection and you don't go with a Stones comp, I think that's the first album you need in your record collection by the Rolling Stones is this one, and it's the Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed. This did score golds and platinums, but I think this is the absolute must-have Rolling Stones album in every record collection, bar none, even though, like I said, other albums that came at later dates after this did sell more. This, I think, has earned the right to be called a legendary album. It is singly, I think, in my opinion, a lot of people talk Exile on Main Street. For me personally, this is their greatest album. Gimme Shelter, Love in Vain, Country Honk, Live With Me, Let It Bleed, Midnight Rambler, You Got the Silver, Monkey Man, and You Can't Always Get What You Want. And this is a 2010, I believe it was, 2010 repress. This particular master, that was a limited edition on a clear vinyl. Really cool. But yeah, Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed, I think, is absolutely, should be in every record collection on the planet Earth. Next up, from Canada, another album that I think should be on every record collection on Earth that you should be able to buy anywhere. And these are our Toronto boys that I've talked about before. And even though this personally isn't my favorite album by this group, I do love this album, but being unbiased and going strictly by chart position, as I've said before, this is their best-selling, best-charting, best-selling album of all time. This is Rush, Moving Pictures. Absolutely spectacular piece of work. And for those that don't know, that was the old Toronto City Hall on the cover where they were moving the pictures. The old Toronto City Hall. But Rush, Moving Pictures, it's an immortal album. Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, Limelight, Camera Eye. Incredible spin. Should be in every single person's collection for some really great progressive and hard rock. Rush, Moving Pictures, must have. Next up, one of my favorite bands, Mr. Carlos Santana. And as I talked about very recently in a contest entry I did, one of the first 3 albums I ever owned in my life was Santana's debut album, Santana, which I've shown on this channel quite a few times. I have currently have a really nice Mo-Fi pressing of that. But this particular album was his best to date album release, and of course he's still making fantastic music. This is his best-selling album to date. This had multiple platinum awards, as well as I think multiple diamond awards. This album was mega huge back around 2000, I believe it originally came out, 99, 2000, 1999, like I figured. And this is a 20th anniversary reissue of the album. This is Santana Supernatural. Santana Supernatural, mega selling album. And this is a 2019 20th anniversary repress of the album. Santana Supernatural, which of course had the massive hit Smooth and Maria. This is an excellent beginning to, and I highly recommend it. Of course, Santana was who I learned to play guitar from. I'd put on my Santana records, especially that first Santana album. I would jam to that entire first Santana album, beginning to end, and that's how I learned to play guitar. And if I was to say my style is anything, my guitar style playing is definitely highly influenced by Carlos Santana's guitar playing, as he was kind of my mentor in learning how to play. I learned how to play guitar on my own, and Santana is what I played more of than anything else. And that right here behind me is a PRS, Paul Reed Smith guitar I bought just a few years ago, and it is a Santana edition, as it says right on the head. This was designed and approved and executed by Carlos Santana himself. He designed this he designed this guitar, and Paul Reed Smith makes it. It's a Santana edition, Paul Reed Smith. So hence, yeah, obviously I'm a big Santana fan. But yeah, Santana Supernatural. You cannot go wrong with this incredible piece of music from 1999. Next up, a little bit more metal. They call it metal, but for me, back in the day, we called this just hard rock. That's right, hard rock, not metal. But this group has been coined sometimes as being a metal band. They are the Scorpions, and this is Love It, First Sting. And while Crazy World, which was 2 albums after this, was charted a little higher and had a few more platinums and a diamond even, I think this album personally is a better spin and probably more a funner spin, if that's the word for it, funner, I don't know. It, of course, had the massive hit Standard, one of the great classic rock songs of all time. Rock You Like a Hurricane was on here, and of course Still Loving You, an incredible song. So yeah, Scorpions, Love It First Sting, I would put as one of the quintessential hard rock albums of all time. Big City Nights was on here. Love It First Sting, Scorpions. This is when they reissued all of their albums, remastered and reissued them all. And of course, this album was a censored album cover, actually. There was a few versions where there was a little bit too much side boob showing, so they had to tone this album down when they released it in North America. And some of the covers, they kind of darkened this area out because there's a little side boob. But this is the original cover, the way it was meant to be seen. And definitely considered an iconic, it is considered one of the great album covers of all time in a lot of album cover books that talk about album cover art. This is definitely up there as one of the great album covers of all time. Scorpions' Love at First Sting. Next up, you can't talk, we got a little bit of 80s music, and in my first video I showed quite a few 80s synth pop and whatnot bands, but I haven't really shown too much yet here. And this is Simple Minds, one of the biggest albums I think to come out of the 80s. Simple Minds, another great 80s band, and this album is famous for Once Upon a Time, Alive and Kicking, Oh Jungle Land, Sanctify Yourself, among others. A fantastic spin, and to get some really quality 80s music in your collection, Simple Minds, Once Upon a Time, definitely put it in your collection. Next up, some 90s grunge for you. One of probably the greatest grunge band of all time, Soundgarden. And this is their Super Unknown album by Soundgarden. Super Unknown, definite must-have in every record collection. With, of course, the big song on here was Black Hole Sun, and another big one, Spoon Man. One of the greatest garage albums of all time, Soundgarden, with the late Mr. Chris Cornell. Next up, I'm going to move on here. Another great band from the 70s. They are Styx. This is The Grand Illusion, their most successful album in their entire library. The Styx, Grand Illusion, their most successful album, with, of course, Come Sail Away, You're Fooling Yourself, Miss America, Man in the Wilderness, Castle Walls, The Grand Illusion. This is an excellent spin, beginning to end. Styx, The Grand Illusion, get it? This was from 1977. The Styx, Grand Illusion. Get some sticks in your life. Pick up some sticks. Another band, another great 70s band, and their greatest album. Now, this is, of course, their best-selling album, multiple platinums, multiple diamonds. My personal favorite by this band is Crime of the Century. My personal favorite album by this band is Crime of the Century, but this was their biggest seller, and you can't go wrong with this album. This is Supertramp, Breakfast in America, with, of course, Gone Hollywood, The Logical Song, Goodbye Stranger, Breakfast in America, Take the Long Way Home, Just Another Nervous Wreck, Child of Vision. A great spin beginning to end. You will not go wrong with this, and this is a really nice recent remaster and repress. Supertramp, Breakfast in America, a must-have in every collection in the world. Next up, some more 2010s music for you, and a young lady that has done extremely well for herself in the last 20 years, since the mid-2000s. And she's currently just released another album that she recorded in quarantine, which I have yet to listen to, and I'm sure it's fantastic from what I've heard. And her album from last year, Lover, was one of my favorite albums from last year for sure. And this is currently, to date, her biggest selling album. This is Taylor Swift, 1989. Fantastic album by Miss Taylor Swift. One of the greatest artists, certainly of the last 15 years. And this is a 2014 release. Taylor Swift, 1989. I think everybody should have this in their collection. With Welcome to New York, Blank Space, Style, Out of the Woods, All You Had to Do Was Stay, Shake It Off, I Wish You Would, Bad Blood, Wildest Dreams, How to Get the Girl, This Love, I Know Places, and Clean. Taylor Swift, 1989, a must-have in every record collection on the planet Earth. And we're almost done. Another great album, and this was late 80s, mid-late 80s, 1988, yes, like I said, late 80s. And this was a collaboration of some great artists, and those artists were Jeff Lynne, who I've talked about in my last video, one of the greatest songwriters of all time, Jeff Lynne, who'd made, of course, ELO, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, Roy Orbison, and George Harrison. And this collaboration, they were called the Traveling Wilburys, and this is their one of only 2 albums they made, and this was volume 1 of the Traveling Wilburys. with Handle With Care, Dirty World, Rattled, Last Night, Not Alone Anymore, Congratulations, Heading for the Light, Margarita, Tweeter and the Monkey Man, and End of the Line. A must-have in every record collection, because this collaboration of these 5 artists was truly incredible. The Traveling Wilburys, Volume 1. Another one of the greatest, probably one of the greatest hair metal bands, or hard rock hair metal. I don't know what you classify them as. This is their greatest album, in my opinion. Absolutely their greatest album. Though some others might differ, and certainly was their best-selling album over anything else they ever recorded. This is Van Halen and their debut album, Van Halen. This album just blows the doors off from the minute it starts to the last second of the album. This is an incredible spin. As far as I'm concerned, it is their greatest album, and it is a fine example of 80s rock, hard rock hair metal. One of the finest examples to come out of the 80s. Of course, with You Really Got Me, the old Kink standard. Jamie's Crying, On Fire, Running with the Devil, I'm the One, my favorite Van Halen song of all time, Ain't Talking About Love, Little Dreamer, Feel Your Love Tonight, Atomic Punk, Eruption, and I'm Your Ice Cream Man. Van Halen, self-titled debut album. And the last 4 albums we got here. And of course, you can't talk about albums to be in every record collection on the planet, and groups, just like we've talked about groups like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. Another one of the greatest UK bands in history, The Who, and Who's Next. Though, one day I might say Quadrophenia is my favorite spin. Another day I might say Tommy. Another day I might say Who's Next. This album was the clear winner as far as sales go. Who's Next? It's legendary. Every record collection should have this in it. It's just one of those albums with Bab O'Reilly, Bargain, Love Ain't For Keepin', My Wife's Song Is Over, Getting in Tune, Going Mobile, Behind Blue Eyes, and the incredible Won't Get Fooled Again. That was pretty much an anthem for the teenagers when I was growing up. Won't Get Fooled Again wasn't one of our anthems. The Who, and this was a really nice repress from about a year ago on a beautiful blue vinyl with the original track record label. So The Who, Who's Next, absolutely must be in every collection on the planet. Can't go wrong. Now, as I just talked about The Who, and I just mentioned the Beatles a couple minutes ago, as far as I'm concerned, Paul McCartney, my favorite music from any of the Beatles musicians, even over Beatles music, was Paul McCartney and Wings. Paul McCartney and Wings were my jam, even over the Beatles. Of course, I got into music just as the Beatles broke up and Wings was forming. So, of course, Wings was the ones that was the group that was releasing new music when I was a teenager. So obviously I gravitated towards Wings, and the Beatles were already done when I had just started getting into music. So Paul McCartney and Wings, I think, which is Paul McCartney's best era of making records, was with the band Wings. And I did show their greatest hits album on the greatest hits video, but hands down, this album here to me is my favorite of any Beatle, solo or with the Beatles. If you talk the Beatles, I would have to say this album right here, Band on the Run, is my single favorite Beatles, non-Beatles, Beatles member, whatever, album ever released. And this did actually chart better than any other Paul McCartney album. So, and certainly was the Wings #1 charting album and #1 selling album as far as platinums and golds and blah 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 goes. And this is Band on the Run, Paul McCartney and Wings, famous for, of course, Band on the Run, Jet, 1985, Bluebird, Mrs. Vanderbilt, Let Me Roll It, and this version here is the American and Canadian version, which of course had the inner liner and the big poster. But why I prefer this album, the Canadian or US pressing, over any other pressing in the world, is because this pressing has one more track on it than the original UK pressing, or pretty much any pressing anywhere else in the world. only had 4 tracks on side B. And on the Canadian US pressing, we got 1 extra track, and it was their big mega hit, Hell on Wheels. That's right, Hell on Wheels was only found on the first Canadian and US pressings. And even the modern remaster and reissue US pressing doesn't have Hell on Wheels on it. So only the original Canadian and US pressings had Hell on Wheels on them, which was a massive single for Wings. So yeah, Wings, Band on the Run, definitely one that should be in every record collection, which featured, of course, Wings on the cover. We had Paul, we had Linda, but there are a few other people on here, and most of you should know the story of this cover. I'm not going to tell you who everybody is on the cover because you can look it up for yourself, but Mr. James Coburn, one of my favorite actors of all time, on here. He was Our Man Flint, In Light Flint, Charade, so many movies, Duffy, James Coburn, and of course Christopher Lee, famous for doing all those British Hammer horror Dracula movies. He was the man with the golden gun in the James Bond films. He was the White Wizard in the Tower in Lord of the Rings films. So Christopher Lee was on that cover, James Coburn, and a few others that you'll have to look up yourself. Band on the Run, Paul McCartney and Wings. Second last one here, got to mention Yes. Of course, we have to mention Yes, one of the greatest prog rock bands of all time. And while I would probably pick Fragile or the Yes album, personally, as an album as a jumping off point for Yes, it was this album, was their biggest selling album in their entire discography. It did get multiple platinums and even a diamond. I believe it had a diamond, I can't remember. But it did have multiple platinums. It did outsell anything else that Yes made. And it had quite a different band lineup. Of course, Steve Howe, who was guitarist in the majority of Yes albums, had departed for this album. And we had Trevor Rabin, a young man that had stepped in to do the next few Yes albums, doing guitar. But it is a fabulous band. I love it too. I mean, I gravitate towards the Yes album or Fragile, but or Close to the Edge. I think is my single favorite Yes album is Close to the Edge. But this is the one that did the biggest sales, and the one that people would, if they stuck it in their collection, they'd know most of the music on this. I was going to say 90120 of Beverly Hills. 90125, yes, featuring, of course, Owner of a Lonely Heart, the massive single for them. And this was a record store day, limited to $5,000. $5,000? I didn't pay that much. This is literally... I've been talking too long. This is limited to 5,000 copies, record store day pressing on picture disc, and this one another great sounding picture disc. Yes, 90125. Last album, last up. This is it. This is all. And U2 are definitely one of my favorite bands of all time, and they've had massive success. Multiple platinum albums, multiple diamond albums. If you go through, they're all very close, but there is one standout album that does stand out from all the others in, like I said, in regards to sales, and that is the Joshua Tree. Now you might say, well, it doesn't look like Joshua Tree. Well, this is the Joshua Tree, but this is the super deluxe limited edition, and it weighs a ton, folks. Super Dark Deluxe limited edition that I just had to have when it came out a few years ago of the Joshua Tree, and I will just pull this apart. But you don't need the Super Deluxe limited edition to enjoy this album. It came with a humongous, absolutely humongous art book of photographs from the Joshua Tree recording and sessions. It came with some more. These were more photographs. These were actually like lithographs in here. There's so many things in here. So it came with 3 records, 3 LPs, and these were all remixes and extra music. Then there was the live album, Joshua Tree Tour in 1987, Madison Square Gardens, New York, live album, double live. And of course, this is the album I'm talking about, U2, Joshua Tree. This is the recent, like I said, remix and remaster that came out a few years ago. And you don't need this massive box set, but I think you do need the Joshua Tree. I would put this down as one of the best sounding records in my entire collection. I mean, even over MoFis and original master recordings and all that stuff. This pressing of Joshua Tree is spectacular. It's one to show off my stereo system. Was completely blown away by the sound quality of this record. I highly recommend this album. For the sheer tonal quality of this album, this is the perfect remaster remix. Absolutely, hands down. U2, the Joshua Tree, which of course featured Where the Streets Have No Name. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. With or Without You, Bullet the Blue Sky, and a whole bunch of other great stuff. U2, the Joshua Tree. And that is the remaining 33 legendary albums that should be in every single record collection on this planet. So that's it. That's all. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. I always love to have new subscribers. And I appreciate your comments down below. As always, I always welcome comments on my videos and what I can do to improve my videos or whatever. This one ran long again, but I had a lot to show you. And don't forget to turn the notification bell on so you don't miss my videos. I try to post a video like this every Monday or Tuesday. I have a new episode. And don't forget to look me up on Instagram at AGK_Lifetime of Vinyl, where I try to post my spin of the day every day. That's it. That's all. Thanks for watching, as always. And I will see you all again next week for another episode of AGK's Vinyl Life.